ثم أما بعد. Okay, pay attention. This is a little just overwhelming. When we talk about expiations, because, sometimes you learn things for their practical use and utility, and sometimes you learn things because you need to learn them because you should be teaching or giving dawah, and this class is a combination of both. We try to cater to everyone. So some of the people may want to learn stuff that may sound impertinent. So if it sounds impertinent to you, please forgive me. And, it doesn't help that I am monotonous and like a little redundant sometimes, but just forgive that and try to pay attention and focus as much as you can, because it's a lot of information that we need to sort out in this particular chapter, al-Fidya, expiation. Okay, so now Fidya and Hajj in general, why would you need to expiate? It is not always expiation. The word fidya or expiation itself is to some extent a misnomer, because it's not always expiation. It's not always that you've done anything wrong. Because sometimes you did not do anything wrong, but you need to do like a makeup for the Hajj. Like you missed the Hajj, but you did not really do anything wrong. It's just that you missed it. You're on your way and you missed Arafah. But you need to make up for this. Sometimes it's not that you're making up for anything that was done wrong in Hajj. You made tamattu because the Prophet preferred the tamattu for you, and you wanted to make tamattu as the Prophet commanded the Sahaba to make tamattu. But that is why it's called the Hadi. It's not called Fidya. It's called the Hadi. It's like a gift. It's a gift to Al-Haram because you are showing gratitude to Allah that He allowed you on one trip to do both Hajj and Umrah on one trip, and instead of having to come back for the other nusuk or the other sha'ira on a different trip. So you're showing gratitude to Allah by sacrificing for tamattu or qiran, which is combining Hajj and Umrah together. So it is not always a fidya. It's sometimes just like a show of gratitude. It's not always expiation. It's not always a makeup. It's not always for redemption from an error or a sin. Sometimes it is, but not always. So when is it that we need to sacrifice? When is it that there is some financial liability on us? Because it's not always a sacrifice, some liability, something that we'll have to do for makeup or for a show of gratitude. One, let's get this out of the way, which is the show of gratitude. When you make a tamattu or qiran, combine Hajj and Umrah together, or do Umrah and then come out of your state of Ihram and then do Hajj, which is called tamattu, you're showing gratitude to Allah that you had allowed me to make these two, Hajj and Umrah, on one trip, and then this is the offering, and then when we sacrifice, we're not doing this, we're doing this basically to feed the poor people. This is not basically feasting on blood or enjoying bloodshed or any of that stuff. All humanity, except very few people that are strict vegetarian or this or that, for what they consider to be ethical reasons, but for the vast majority of humanity, they eat meat. When we sacrifice animals, the only difference is that we are doing this to feed others, not to feed ourselves. That's it. Everybody sacrifices animals all the time. People think that if it is done in factory somewhere else, I'm not responsible. No, if you're a meat eater, you are responsible. And so if this is wrong, it doesn't absolve you of guilt. That is being done somewhere else outside of your eyesight. You're the consumer. They're doing this because they know that someone will purchase it at the end of the day. So when we sacrifice the animals, the only difference is we're doing this to feed others, not only ourselves. Sometimes we share with others in whatever we sacrifice. Sometimes we don't even share. If it is done to make up for an error or like a sin, we don't even eat from it. We just do it so that we could feed other people, other poor people. So keep that in mind. So sometimes it's a show of gratitude that is tamattu or qiran. Sometimes it is for fi'l mahzur. It is to make up for your mistake, your error. If you violated the ihram, if you violated the rules of ihram, then sometimes expiation would be required. Sometimes it is for tark wajib, for basically missing out on one of the obligations of Hajj. Abandoning it, neglecting it, or just missing out because you did not get to it. One of the obligations of Hajj, such as al-Mabit b'Mina, or the many obligations of Hajj that we will talk about in detail, that are not considered pillars, because if you miss out on a pillar, which is wuquf ba'arafah, standing at Arafah, or tawaf al-ifada, these are the two main pillars of Hajj, in addition to the niyyahs, for sure. But these are the two main pillars of Hajj, Arafah and tawaf al-ifada. If you miss one of these, your Hajj is invalid. But if you miss the obligations of Hajj, you could make up by a sacrifice. So a show of gratitude for tamattu and qiran, making up for violating the ihram, and making up for missing a wajib, an obligation of Hajj. Also missing the whole Hajj. You make up for missing the whole Hajj by a sacrifice. And then the only thing that is left, we said for tamattu and qiran, to show gratitude for violating the ihram, for missing out on the wajib or missing out the whole Hajj. The only thing that is left is killing game, but this is a little bit different, because this is considered just like it is like a violation of ihram, but has different rulings. But you could say that it is under the violations of ihram still, but it does have some different rulings. Finally, if you have been prevented from proceeding to Hajj by an enemy, or like sort of highwaymen, or unjustifiable detention, or any of those reasons, and according to the Hanafis and Malikis as well, sickness and lack of means to proceed, but not according to the Hanbalis or the Shafi'is. But according to the Hanbalis and Shafi'is, it has to be like an overwhelming force from outside, an overwhelming external force. So detention, or like an enemy that stopped you, or unjustifiable detention. The Hanafis and Malikis add to ihsar what? Sickness and lack of means, running out of money, or running out of means to proceed. So these are the things that we will discuss now, the expiation for them. These are the things that we'll discuss the expiation for them. The classification that the scholars use to discuss the expiation, they divide the expiations into two different categories that are big. One is when the sequence is not required. Basically, you have options. The other category is when the sequence is required. Do this if you cannot do that, if you cannot do that. First one, do this, or this, or this. The second category, do this. If you are unable, then you may do that. If you are unable, then you may do that. Sequence is required. Is that clear? Because we have, okay. So Imam Qudamah rahimahullah here says, باب الفدية, chapter on expiation, وهي على ضربين أحدهما على التخيير. It is of two types. The expiation is of two types. The first is where one is given a choice, تخيير, وهي فدية الأذى واللبس والطيب, فله الخيار بين صيام 3 أيام أو إطعام 3 آصع من تمر ل6 مساكين أو ذبح شاة. The first one, which is where he's given options, this is the expiation for shaving the hair due to some necessity, wearing clothes that are sewn, or wearing perfume. The person has the choice to fast 3 days, feed 3 saws of dates to 6 poor individuals, or slaughter a sheep or goat. So these are the 3 choices that you have if you violated your ihram by wearing clothes, putting perfume, or shaving or clipping your nails. Wearing clothes, putting perfume, shaving or clipping your nails, you have one of 3 options. One option is goat or sheep, to offer a goat or sheep. The other option is to fast 3 days. The third option is to feed 6 people 3 saws of food. What are 3 saws of food? 1 saw is about 4.5 pounds. 3 saws would be about 13.5 pounds of food. That is any type of food except for wheat in the Hanbali madhab, because because wheat was expensive, and so 1 saw of tamr would be equal to half a saw of wheat in value. So they figured that feeding 6 people, each one of them half a saw of tamr, or half of that of wheat. What is half of half a saw? So what is 1 saw? 1 saw of tamr would be equal to half a saw of wheat in value. So they figured 1 pound and change, like one and just a little bit above 1 pound, so 1.2 pounds. That is 1 mud. Multiply this by 4 and you get the saw. Now what is it that we are required to feed every poor person of those 6 poor people that we will feed? We will feed them half a saw of dates. So we will feed them about 1.1 kilograms of dates, let us say. 2.2 pounds of dates. But when it comes to wheat, we will feed them what? Half of this. 1.1 pounds of wheat, and multiply this by 6. Now, there are some scholars who say that this is not, that the Prophet did not really mention 1 mud of wheat, that this is something that ijtihad of the scholars afterwards, and they don't accept that ijtihad, but this is the position in the madhab. Wheat has a higher value, therefore half of the amount of other foods will be enough. If you, okay. And then so this is the first thing. That's clear, right? Then moving on. So that is violating ihram. And that is not all violations of ihram, because killing a game is also violation of ihram. But this violation of ihram by shaving, clipping, wearing clothes that you should not be wearing, and for the sisters, if you wear the niqab or if you put on gloves, that also would make you liable for this violation. Now he's moving on to the second type. The second type within this same, when sequence is not required. Sequence is not required, because here you have 1, 2, or 3. Feed 6 people, fast 3 days, or offer a goat or sheep. Now, the second type where sequence is not required is when you're killing game animals, because Allah said, لا تقتلوا الصيد وأنتم حرم ومن قتله منكم متعمدا فجزاء مثل ما قتل من النعم يحكم به ذوى عدل منكم هديا بالغ الكعبة أو or كفارة طعام مساكين أو عدل or عدل ذلك صياما ليذوق وبال أمره. So because Allah said in Surah Al-Ma'idah, whoever kills a game animal, then the sort of the expiation for this is مثل ما قتل من النعم, is a similar animal of the domestic animals, so something similar to that game in the domestic animals. So game animals like an aama, for instance, what is similar to it, because it was expensive during their time, ostrich, expensive during their time. So what was similar to it? A cow, or a camel. And if you kill like anything the size of a sheep, then you sacrifice a sheep or a goat. If you kill anything that is bigger, you sacrifice a cow or like a camel. And sometimes, because certain things came from the Sahaba, they just wanted, for instance, to honor hammam in particular, pigeons in particular. So the punishment for this was a goat. So if someone kills a hammama, a pigeon, he would have to sacrifice a goat. So when it comes to killing game animals, you will have to offer a similar animal to sacrifice a comparable animal that is domestic, a comparable animal that is domestic. Hadiyan baligh al-Kaaba, that will have to be given to the people of the Haram, the Masakeen, the poor people of al-Haram. The poor people of al-Haram do not have to be the residents of Mecca. The poor people of al-Haram could be also the wafideen, could be also the visitors. It's not like, you have to give me your ID and have to make sure that it's whoever is there of the masakeen, any miskeen that is there. Okay. So you give this to this offering. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أو كفارة طعام مساكين. And then أو عدل ذلك صياما. Or, now, it's an offering. You sacrifice an animal that is comparable, or you value this animal, the value of this animal, the value of the sheep or the goat. You figure out the value of the sheep and the goat, and let us say the sheep was $200. You buy dates or wheat for $200. You buy dates or wheat, which is kafaratun ta'amu masakin, the same value of the goat or sheep or the camel or cow that you should have sacrificed in place of this game that you killed in al-Haram or while in a state of ihram. You figure out the value and you give this out in the form of food. You have that option, either or. Now, you have a third option. Allah said in Surah Al-Ma'idah, أَوْ عَدْلُ ذَلِكَ صِيَامًا لِيَذُوقَ بَلَ أَمْرِهِ, or whatever is equal to this in the form of fasting. How could you, what is equal in the form of fasting? It's explained by the Prophet ﷺ. Not in Hadith Ka'b ibn Ujra, but in general, if you are not fasting and you feed someone, feeding a person like a ta'am miskin for every day, right? When Ramadan, when you don't fast, what do? You feed ta'am miskin to every person, right? Here, the same will apply. So I should have given 200, wheat is always causing us a problem because wheat is controversial and it's half of. But let's say $200, I would have bought dates for $200. How much dates for $200? Let us say 200 sa'as of dates. Let us say 200 sa'as of dates. 200 sa'as of date. So 200 sa'as of date. 1/2 of a sa' of dates is enough to feed a poor person. So 200 sa'as of dates, you need to feed 400 people. You can feed 400 people with 200 sa'as of date. It got blown out of proportion here. Then you have to fast for 100 days. No, let us say it was not that expensive. Not $200. It was just like $50. And $50 would have gotten you, you would have been able to feed 100 people. So you'll have to fast 100 days. Anyway, you're being encouraged to feed people in the first place. So, but if you really can't feed, And if you can't sacrifice the animal, the appropriate comparable animal, and you cannot feed, then you will have to fast. And it will be whatever number of days. So what is like for every miskin that you should have fed, you fast 1 day. Clear? How do you figure out how many masakin you need to feed? The value of the animal that you should have sacrificed. Because you have 3 options. You sacrifice an animal. You kill the pigeon in the haram. Whatever the Sahaba, whenever there is arbitration by the Sahaba, they accept it and they don't talk about it anymore. When there is no arbitration established from the Sahaba, traceable to the Sahaba, then we will have to figure out what is the value of this. They have to estimate the value of this. But many of the animals that are there, there is usually a hukuma or arbitration by the Sahaba, so you just follow them. So the Sahaba said if you kill a pigeon, you sacrifice a goat. Then the goat is for $50. Then $50 can buy you 100 sa'as of wheat. Every half sa' will be enough to feed a poor person. So you should be feeding, with us 100 sa'as, 200 poor people. Or you should be fasting 200 days. Does that make it clear? Okay. So he said, وَجَزَاءُ الصَّيْدِ مِثْلُ مَا قَطْرَ مِنَ النَّعَمِ إِلَّا الطَّائِرَ فَإِنَّ فِيهِ قِيمَتَهُ إِلَّا الْحَمَامَ فَفِيهَا شَاء وَالنَّعَامَ فَفِيهَا بَدَنَ وَيُخَيَّرُ بَيْنَ إِخْرَاجِ المثل أو تقويمه بطعام فيطعم لكل مسكين مدا أو يصوم عن كل مد يوما. The expiation for killing game animals is a domestic animal that is equal to the wild one killed except for birds, as their value instead would be due except for a pigeon, for which a sheep is due, and an ostrich, for which a camel is due. He is given the choice of sacrificing an equal domestic animal or given its value in food, feeding a mud, that's of wheat, to every poor individual, or fasting a day in place of every mud he had to give away. And that is number 2 of the expiations where the sequence is not required. Now we will move to where the sequence is required. الضرب الثاني على الترتيب وهو المتمتع يلزمه شاة فإن لم يجد فصيام 3 أيام في الحج و7 إذا رجع. The second type is where the sequence must be followed. This is for the person who is performing tamattu. He must sacrifice a sheep or goat. If he does not have one, then he must fast 3 days while in Hajj or at Hajj, and 7 days when he returns to his home land. Okay, so let's get this out of the way, okay? Now we're moving to, this is no sequence. We're moving to where sequence is required. He said the first one is tamattu, and with tamattu also always add qiran, whether it is tamattu or qiran. Tamattu means umrah, then hajj. Qiran means umrah and hajj combined, together. So whether you're doing tamattu or qiran, anything other than ifrad, just doing hajj alone, you will need to give hadi or to sacrifice. And that sacrifice is goat or sheep. Goat or sheep. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَمَنْ تَمَتَّعَ بِالْعُمْرَةِ إِلَى الْحَجِّ فَمَا اسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدِي فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ 3 أيام في الحج و7 إذا رجعتم تلك 10 كاملة ذلك لمن لم يكن أهله حاضر المسجد الحرام. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah said, whoever gets to enjoy doing the Umrah and Hajj at the same time, enjoy coming out of their ihram of Umrah and doing Hajj on the same trip, بالعمرة إلى الحج فما استيسر من الهدي. Then due upon them is ما استيسر من الهدي. Whatever hadi is affordable to them. But at the end of the day, he's not going to slaughter a chicken and say, this is affordable to me. It's got to be a goat or sheep. So you find a goat or sheep, and the goat, the sheep could be 6 months old. The goat has to be 1 year old. So 6 months for the sheep, 1 year for the goat. So then you slaughter a goat or a sheep. But then Allah said, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ, because this is always the Islamic way of things. Allah knows people have different capacities. Allah does not burden a soul beyond its capacity. لَا يُكَلِّفُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا مَا أَتَاهَا or إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. So Allah does not burden any soul beyond. There are always alternatives, and this is something we learn also in da'wah and in teaching. You must always come up with alternatives, because we could sometimes be obsessed with deconstruction and refutation, and just complete failures at synthesis and sort of alternatives and construction. Stuff like this. So you should be understanding the reality of people. Should not ask them anything beyond their capacity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, whoever does not find a goat or sheep to slaughter, or cannot afford to slaughter a goat or sheep, فَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ فِي الْحَجِّ وَسَبْعَةٍ إِذَا رَجَعْتُمْ, then fasting 3 days at Hajj or during Hajj, and 7 when they go back to their homeland. What is meant by at Hajj or during Hajj? The 3 days at Hajj or during Hajj. For the majority, this has to be while you are in a state of ihram. Not just in the months of Hajj, but while you are in a state of ihram. So you could do this while you are in a state of ihram, not necessarily for Hajj, but also for Umrah. And outside of being in a state of ihram, they allow this during the 3 days of Tashriq. So if you are in a state of ihram now, because you're doing your Umrah, your tamattu, fast while you're doing your Umrah. In your state of ihram while you're doing your Umrah. And then you could also start your ihram on the 7th and fast the 7th, 8th, and 9th. If you are unable to do this, fast the 7th, 8th, and 9th. You could fast the 8th and 9th and keep 1 day for later. Because you start, Yawm al-Tarwiyah is the 8th, and Arafah is the 9th. They allow you in this case, they say it's okay for you to fast on Arafah in this case because you need to fast. Otherwise, it's not recommended for people to fast on Arafah. So when you arrive and you are doing Umrah, fast the day you are doing Umrah, and then fast the 8th and 9th. You're done. Or fast the 7th, 8th, and 9th. You're done. Or fast the 8th and 9th, and then you will have 1 day one more day to fast. They allow you to fast in the days of Tashriq, not the Eid day, not the 10th. You fast on the 11th, 12th, or the 13th, and you're done. If you just decided to not fast, any of those days during your Umrah, 7th or 8th and 9th, then you're required to fast the 11th, 12th, and 13th. Fast the 11th, 12th, and 13th, the 3 days of Tashriq. You fast those days. And then you would have fasted 3 days in Hajj. And when you go back home, you fast the 7 remaining days. When you go back home, you fast the 7 remaining. Keep in mind, what if someone just decided to fast before he goes back home? Just wants to fast. It will count. Mujz, to fast before you go home. However, it will not count if you start in the days of Tashriq. Let us say you finished the 3 days on the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And you said, let me get a head start on it and fast on the days of Tashriq, some of the 7 days that I should fast when I return to my homeland. They will not count. You can't fast on the days of Tashriq except those 3 days, if you have not fasted them yet. Those 7 days have to start after the end of the days of Tashriq. And preferably when you go back home, as Allah said in the Quran. Okay? So 3 days and then 7 days. And this is for tamattu' or qiran. This is for tamattu' or qiran. Now Imam ibn Qudamah then said, rahimahullah ta'ala, وجزاه عنا خيرا, he said, وفدية الجماع بدنة فإن لم يجد فصيام كصيام المتمتع وكذلك الحكم في دم الفوات. For the one who had an intercourse, he must sacrifice a camel or a cow. You know, cows like camels. وهل هن إلا بدن. You know, they're only like camels. So, a camel or a cow. For the one who had intercourse, he must sacrifice, and this is intercourse when? Before tahallul. After tahallul, a goat. Before tahallul al-awwal, the first tahallul, it is a camel. After tahallul al-awwal, it's a goat. فدية الجماع بدنة فإن لم يجد. Okay, if he does not, if he cannot afford it, he must fast like the one making tamattu. The ruling is the same for the sacrifice due for missing the Hajj, or for missing an obligation, or for missing an obligation, for missing in general, Hajj or obligation. So now we're talking about intercourse and we're talking about missing, and they have the same ruling in the sense that the sequence is required. What is required of the one who had intercourse before tahallul? Cow or camel. If they cannot do that, then they're just like al-Mutamatta or the Qarin. They must fast 3 days in Hajj and 7 days upon their return. 3 days in Hajj and 7 days upon the return. What if you miss Hajj? The same applies to you. You arrive on the 10th. You know, nowadays it's laughable, but it was not laughable then because everybody was coming from a different direction. It was just like, you know, and really you could easily miss the day. So it did happen in the past. If you missed the Hajj, then the same applies. You sacrifice, but it is not a camel. So the sacrifice of a camel is only for intercourse. So, but this will be sacrificing a goat. You sacrifice a goat or a sheep, and if you cannot sacrifice a goat or a sheep, what do? Fast. But in this case, you know, if you missed and you come after Hajj, completely after Hajj, then you'll just fast the 10 days. You will fast the 10 days. Now, if you miss a wajib and you're still in Hajj, then you need to follow the same scheme. You fast 3 days in Hajj and 7 days after you return. The same scheme. If you miss a wajib and you cannot offer a sheep or goat, then you fast 3 days in Hajj and 7 days when you return. And then we will have a whole session on wajibat and arkan al-Hajj, or the obligatory acts in Hajj. So that is clear, right? What is left is only ihsar, right? You will come to ihsar now.
Is there a minimum age for the camel or the cow?
5 and 2. 2 years and 5 years. So now al-muhsar yalzamuhu dam. فَإِن لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ عَشْرَةِ أَيَّامٍ. The person who is prevented from proceeding must sacrifice an animal. If he cannot afford it, he must fast for 10 days. So the person who is prevented from proceeding must sacrifice an animal. If he cannot afford it, he must fast for 10 days. Now the muhsar is a long story. So the muhsar now, it means, muhsar means what? Prevented, withheld, kept back. Husr, uhsar. So, you know, now that is the muhsar. How could this happen? Detention, arrest, sort of unjustifiable stuff, highwaymen, you know, kidnapping you, enemies, war, you know, that used to happen in the past, during the Crusaders. This used to happen often for people on their way to Hajj, that they'd be prevented. So that is called the ihsar. Hanafis and Malikis added to this someone who got sick and stuff like this, or someone who sort of ran out of money. But according to the Hanbalis, muhsar is by an enemy or a detention. Now, so if there is ihsar and you cannot proceed to make Hajj, but you can proceed to Mecca, like they prevent you from going to Arafah, but they did not, you could make it to Mecca. Then they say, it's easy, go make Umrah and nothing is required of you. Just go make Umrah. And your tahallul, your exit from your state of ihram, because once you have, why are we saying all of this? Because once you embark on the nusuk, once you are in a state of ihram, you cannot exit from that state of ihram just because you want to. You only exit from the state of ihram when you fulfill the rite, the nusuk, the hajj or the umrah. Only. If you don't fulfill it, you will continue to be in state of ihram. Things will be forbidden for you. You keep on doing them because you're not, and you keep on making yourself more and more liable. So you cannot come out of your state of ihram except by fulfilling the hajj and umrah or following the procedures to get out of the state of ihram. Now, if you were prevented from proceeding to Arafah, but you could still make it to Mecca, go to Mecca and make your umrah. If you're prevented from both, from going to, Arafah and Mecca, then in this case, you will sacrifice and exit from your state of ihram. The Hanbalis do not even ask you to shave or do anything. Just sacrifice and walk home. Sacrifice and walk home. Except, which is a little bit of a problem here for the Hanbalis and Shafi'is, except if you made your tawaf al-ifada, if you have not made your tawaf al-ifada, you made your hajj but you did not make your tawaf al-ifada, if you made your arafah but you did not make your tawaf al-ifada, between arafah and tawaf al-ifada, you could get stuck here, because if you are prevented from making tawaf al-ifada and you already made your arafah, according to the Hanbalis, not the Shafi'is here, if you stood at arafah but you're prevented from making tawaf al-ifada, Hanbalis will tell you wait for 7 years, whatever it takes you to make tawaf al-ifada. You cannot exit from that ihram until you make tawaf al-ifada. The Shafi'is will allow you to sacrifice, shave, and walk home. To sacrifice, shave, and walk home. The Hanbalis will say, since tawaf al-ifada is the only thing that is left, and there is no hardship for you to wait around, just wait until you make tawaf al-ifada, and and then go home afterwards. But wait until you make tawaf al-ifada, because mahzurat al-ihram are all okay for you except for intercourse. So that's fine. You could wait, until you make tawaf al-ifada. The Hanbalis say that. The Shafi'is say no. You don't have to wait. These details you will not find in your books, by the way, in that book. There's just like smaller details from Sharh al-Muntaha and other Hanbali books. But that's when it comes to ihsar. That is why to make a condition of exemption at the beginning of the Hajj will make all of these things just go away. All of these things will go away. Why? Because if you make that condition, like Tuba'a was told by the Prophet ﷺ, that Mahalli haythu habastani, like if you prevent me from proceeding, then I will exit from my ihram whenever I am unable to proceed. Whenever you make me unable to proceed, if you make that condition at the time of your ihram, you will not have to worry about any of that stuff. Because whenever you can't proceed, just walk home. That's it. Exit from your state of ihram and walk home. So that is why the Hanbalis consider it to be recommended even though the Prophet ﷺ did not instruct each Sahabi to say it, but the Hanbalis consider it to be recommended because most of the people nowadays, they don't have the stamina to to do all of that stuff, or to stay in a state of ihram until they can figure out how to exit from it and stuff. So you make that condition if you want. Then the Shaykh said, وَمَنْ كَرَّرَ مَحْذُورًا مِنْ جِنْسِ. What is this? We're done? Okay, just give me 10 more minutes, okay? Okay, quickly. ومن كرر محظورا من جنس غير قتل الصيد فكفارة واحدة فإن كفر على الأول قبل فعله الثاني سقط حكم ما كفر عنه. If a person does a forbidden act more than once, aside from killing game animals, then expiation is due once. But if he already compensated for the first forbidden act before committing the second, the ruling pertaining to the first becomes void. He says من جنس واحد غير قتل الصيد. Okay, so if you violate your ihram, you wear something like this, and you wear shoes, and you cover your head. How many expiations? Cover the head, wear the garment, wear shoes, trousers, belt. One, because that is one jins. You violated the mahzur or the prohibition concerning clothes, one jins. But if you wear shoes and put on perfume, how many? Two. Okay. Now, if you wear something and then you don't expiate, and then you wear something else, and you don't expiate, and you wear something else, and you don't expiate, how many? One. If you wear something and then you expiate, and then after you expiate, you cover your head, and then then you will have to expiate again, right? Yes, you have to expiate again. So that's why the soldiers that do their Hajj and Umrah while in their full attire, they just don't expiate until the end, because then they will have to expiate only once. The exception here is killing game animals. Like if you kill an ostrich and then you kill whatever zebra, you kill this, you kill that. Every time you kill something, you will have to. The expiations here do not basically account for one another or do not make up for one another. You have to expiate for every game animal that you kill. And then he said, وَإِنْ فَعَلَ مَحْظُورًا مِنْ أَجْنَاسٍ فَلِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ كَفَّارَةٍ. If he committed two or more forbidden acts of different types, then expiation is due for each one. وَالْحَلْقُ وَالتَّقْلِيمُ وَقَتْلُ الصَّيْدِ يَسْتَوِي عَمْدُهُ وَسَهْوُهُ وَسَائِرُ الْمَحْظُورَاتِ لَا شَيْءَ فِي سَهْوِهِ. For shaving, clipping the nails, having intercourse, and killing game animals, it is the same whether they are done intentionally or absent-mindedly. For the rest of the forbidden acts, there is nothing due in the case of forgetfulness. So if you forget and you put on this, you wear it, like here, or you cover your head, you forget, you cover your head, you forget, you put on perfume. What should you do? Nothing. Nothing. Once you remember, take it off. If you did not take it off immediately, then you will have to expiate. But once you remember, take it off. So now, if you clip the nails, shave the head or clip the nails, that is called itlaf, or kill game animals. That's called itlaf. Whether you do it intentionally or absent-mindedly, according to the four madhahib, you will need to expiate. The same applies to intercourse. However, here are some concessions, and that is always fine to rafa al-haraj. Here are some concessions. Shaving and clipping, according to a report in the Hanbali madhab, that is not the authentic position in the madhab, and one in the Shafi'i madhab, that is not the authorized position in the Shafi'i madhab, and according to Z, for shaving, because clipping for him is not a problem to begin with, and according to Ishaq, and according to Ibn al-Munzir, and according to Ibn Taymiyyah, all of them said that if you do things absent-mindedly, even if it involves itlaf, then which is like the clipping or shaving, all of that stuff would not make you liable. Would not make you liable. Now, when it comes to intercourse, and doing this absent-mindedly is, for some scholars, was inconceivable. But for the Shafi'is, they say, even though they would require the expiation, but they say if it is done absent-mindedly, and that's the authorized, the big S, the authorized position in the madhab al-Shafi'i, if you do this absent-mindedly, it does not spoil your Hajj. Only for the Shafi'is. If you do it absent-mindedly, it does not spoil your Hajj. Now, for the killing of game animals, they consider this to be like a liability, a financial liability. And if you kill someone by error, you're still liable financially. And if you ruin somebody's property by mistake, you're still liable financially. Therefore, they say, and that's the four mazahib, also if you kill game animals absent-mindedly, you're still liable. Even though you have not sinned, but you're liable for the expiation. Absent-mindedly is never a sin. But are you liable for expiation or not? That is always the question. So if you kill a game animal absent-mindedly, then you are liable according to the four mazahib for the expiation. Z said you're not. That's the Zahiris. Ibn Hazm, Zahiris said you are not, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَمَنْ قَتَلَهُ مِنْكُمْ مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاءٌ مِثْلُ مَا قَتَلَ مِنَ النَّعَمِ. Whoever kills a game animal intentionally, Allah said مُتَعَمِّدًا, intentionally, فَجَزَاءٌ مِثْلُ مَا قَتَلَ مِنَ النَّعَمِ, then the expiation for this is a comparable animal, domestic animal. So Ibn Hazm said that by divergent implication, whoever kills a game animal absent-mindedly is not liable for anything. And he has a strong point, to be honest. Then the Sheikh said, وَكُلُّ هَدْيٍ أَوْ إِطْعَامٍ فَهُوَ لِمَسَاكِينِ الْحَرَمِ إِلَّا فِدْيَةَ الْأَذَى يُفَرِّقُهَا فِي الْمَوْضِعِ الَّذِي حَلَقَ فِيهِ وَهَدْيُ الْمُحْصَرِ يَنْحَرُهُ فِي مَوْضِعِهِ وَأَمَّا الصِّيَامِ فَيُجْزِئُهُ بِكُلِّ مَكَانٍ. Every sacrifice or provision of food must be for the poor individuals of al-Haram. That is not necessarily natives, or it is anyone who's there, except for the expiation for shaving or clipping of nails, which could be offered at the place where he shaved. The sacrifice of the one prevented from proceeding must be slaughtered in the place where he is. As for fasting, it is valid anywhere. So whenever you need to sacrifice or when you need to feed people, it will always be in haram, the poor people in haram. Except if you clip your nails or shave outside of the haram, for instance in Arafah or some place, then you could immediately do this outside of al-haram. And for the muhsar, the one who is prevented, he's not able to get there to begin with. How could we demand him to sacrifice at al-haram when he is prevented? He is just unable to get there. Then the muhsar can sacrifice wherever he was stopped and then go home. But otherwise, it will be in haram. He said fasting can be done anywhere, except when fasting is required at Hajj, then you will do it at Hajj. The 3 days that are required at Hajj, then you do them at Hajj. It is not limited to al-Haram. It is about, at Hajj. Not Haram, but at Hajj. I'm sorry, this was a little bit I just couldn't make it any more interesting.